Crisis after crisis is dominating the media and our lives, and while the catastrophes may appear wildly unconnected, my colleague will tell you otherwise. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Thomas Homer-Dixon about the global polycrisis. He is the author of several best-selling books, an adjunct professor with our School of Environment and Sustainability, and founder and director of the Cascade Institute at Royal Roads University. So Ted, I wonder if you could tell me exactly what is a polycrisis?
So a polycrisis is basically a bunch of bad stuff happening all at the same time. A set of intersecting crises that are seeming to come out of the blue from every direction. They seem like they're disconnected, but they're all happening simultaneously. So right at the moment, we have a war in Eastern Europe, we have rampant inflation, we have climate change and extreme weather events, we have civil unrest in many societies around the world, and there's this sense that things are kind of unraveling because of all these shocks simultaneously. So that's really what a polycrisis is. A bunch of things, crises happening where the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And in fact, the harm that's caused by this larger combination of crises is greater than would be the harm if you added up the harms from the individual crises.
And I know in your New York Times article you said, that this isn't just bad luck or coincidence. This is not a perfect storm. So could you just elaborate a little more on that, on how that is different?
Sure. So one of the problems with the perfect storm metaphor, which people use frequently, is it sounds like it's just a coincidence that all this stuff is happening at the same time. Well, at the Cascade Institute, we really believe that's not the case. That there are underlying drivers that are causing things to go critical simultaneously, a whole bunch of global systems to essentially flip or go into crisis mode simultaneously. These drivers can be climate change drivers, they can be declining effectiveness of democracies, a technological change that's producing economic insecurity in societies, demographic change that's contributing to large migrations across borders and within countries. And those drivers together are making systems more fragile. At the same time, we're highly connected together in the world in ways that are really unprecedented, so shocks can travel much faster from one part of the global system to another. And that means that it's likely that these crises are connected together in ways that has never been true before, that they're actually reinforcing each other and producing feedback loops that are causing them to go critical simultaneously.
And I know the name of the Cascade Institute is meant to reflect that. I mean, these are sort of a cascade of challenges, of problems, but you also write about the potential for virtuous cascades, a sort of cascade of successes. And I know you've written about hope before, so can you tell us, in light of all of this, how you remain hopeful and how you think we could actually move into a world in which we were looking at a series of virtuous cascades?
Right. So most of us think of this kind of polycrisis environment as very scary because the patterns of our lives are breaking down, the things that we've come to expect. We're hoping to get back to normal. But given the way the world is changing, we're not going back to where things were. Instead, we have to recognize that sharp, sudden shocks will become a regular part of our lives in the future. But those don't all have to be negative. Some of them can be positive. It's arguable that some of the basic structures of our societies, our economic institutions, the way we use resources and the amount of pollution we emit, those things have to change in very fundamental and major ways. And as these shocks occur, those shocks open up opportunities for rapid change in positive directions because we recognize we have to do something, and all of a sudden people are understanding that it's now or never. So I think there are opportunities for what we would call virtuous cascades, and the Cascade Institute is investigating how to make that happen.
So Ted, just a final question then. I mean, we've all been, facing these various challenges here in British Columbia. I mean, we've dealt with, things we've never had words for before, like atmospheric rivers and heat domes and all kinds of atmospheric challenges, and you've mentioned many others as well, the famine now in East Africa, war, conflict. And you would imagine that the public would be much more alert to all of this right now, but how do you actually convert that that awareness into action at the public level and at the political level?
Mm-hmm. Well, it does seem sometimes like BC is kind of in fate's crosshairs. And it's extraordinary when we think that the pandemic is almost old news now, because there's been this series of other things that have distracted our attention, like the war, like inflation, impending possibly recession, sense of economic insecurity, and of course all the climate impacts. So we argue at the Cascade Institute that it's actually possible to better foresee or anticipate some of these challenges, and especially how they intersect and reinforce each other. How climate and the pandemic both were overloading the healthcare system, for example. How the pandemic and climate change have had economic impacts that have widened economic insecurity, or increased economic insecurity, and widened wealth gaps between rich and poor in British Columbia. And we believe we can foresee better some of these impacts and the crises that would emerge, which would allow our societies and policymakers, politicians, to put in place plans in advance that could dramatically reduce the suffering that results from these crises and make BC more resilient overall.
Yeah. So the call to action here really is to build that analytical capacity to understand what's happening in terms of the polycrisis, and then also the key kind of interventions that could be taken to address it.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the problems we have, of course, in our world is that knowledge tends to be very siloed within our universities, not so much at Royal Roads, of course, but also policy responses and policy knowledge and policy instruments are all very siloed within particular ministries at the provincial and federal levels. So part of the challenge is to break down those silos and get people effectively talking to each other and proposing solutions and responses that cross ministries and can mobilize resources broadly in British Columbia.
Well, I just want to thank you. I mean, thank you and your colleagues at the Cascade Institute, and I know you've got colleagues around the world who are looking at these issues. It's absolutely critical work. And of course, we are here to support you in any way we can, and just want to thank you again. This is hugely important.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for Royal Roads support.
Yeah, thank you.